Okay. Thank you all for joining today for our proper pruning techniques for the home landscape. My name is Lisa Klein. I am with the A&R Department, Agriculture and Natural Resources Department here at UGA Extension Gwinnett. And I offer all sorts of webinars, a couple of them in the evening, usually on Thursdays, and then at least one lunch and learn a month on Tuesdays at noon. I am always open to hearing what folks want to hear. So if you have any thoughts on topics that sound interesting to you or you would like a little bit more information on, I am definitely open to that. And I'll put my information, I think it should be on the last slide, but I'll also put my email address in the chat box. As we go through, you should all be muted. So if you have questions, feel free to drop those in the chat box and I will get to those at the end of the webinar. And just out of curiosity, because we are starting to get to a wider audience now, I'm always interested to see where y'all are from. So you don't necessarily have to put your name in there, but definitely if you don't mind providing your, and I see somebody has drawn on the screen, Linda Williams. If that is you, please stop that. I tried to turn all of that off. So, unfortunately, it looks like I got kicked out and had to come back. So please don't draw on the screen. I try to disable all of that, but I was having some issues with Zoom. So, it didn't do that as it should have. So if you want to put in your location, your town or your county, just so I know where you're from, that would be awesome. That kind of allows me to figure out where my audience is. And if you have any other questions, drop them in the chat box. I'll be happy to answer at the end. So let's go ahead and get started. So pruning is a technique that most people who do any sort of gardening or have a home or a farm or any property have had to do at least some point in their life. Most of what we'll be talking about are going to be woody plants. So that could be a tree, that could be a shrub, that could be, anything along the lines of that. But it's a valuable skill to have, really, and something that you don't have to be as exciting and as beautiful as what you see here, but you definitely will want to know the basics of what you're doing and how you're doing it. So I, several years ago, had decided that since I do a lot of diagnostics here in the extension office, a lot of those ended up being trees and shrubs, that I would go ahead and become a certified arborist, which is actually a pretty difficult process to go through. I was very shocked at what I had to do to go through with that. I had to be involved in the industry for at least 3 years. I had to go through a very rigorous curriculum to learn additional information about trees, about the science behind and everything. And yeah, it was a lot more involved than I guess what I originally thought, but it has helped me immensely in what I do, which is try to help folks decide, is this something that you can tackle yourself? Or is this something that you really need to bring a professional in and get some consulting information out of them as to whether or not this tree is salvageable or anything going forward? So why prune? Well, sometimes I get pictures that people they get their pruners out there and just go to town. And they tell me that they didn't really have a reason why they were going to do that. They didn't have any intention of pruning while they were out there. And then suddenly it looks like a bad haircut and they want to know what can they do to fix it. So always, always, always prune with a purpose. Look at your plants. Don't just go out there and walk around your yard and go, that looks a little odd. Let's take a little off here. Because before you know it, it looks like that Barbie doll from your sister's toy chest back in elementary school. It has no hair. And so sometimes your azalea bush that you didn't intend to prune suddenly doesn't have very many branches or leaves. So it's very important to prune with a purpose and always look at something with an eye of, does it really need it? So why would we prune? Well, we prune for very real reasons, things that are going to help the plant. We want to improve and maintain plant health always, always, always. So you see here's a couple of examples as to why you would prune. You have two branches on the left, they're rubbing, they've grown together, and what this is doing is this is disrupting the bark, the cambium layer, and can cause a lot of damage. It can cause a way for disease, for bugs to get in there and cause more damage. So we don't want that to happen. So in a situation like that, that is an immediate need. Sometimes it's just aesthetics, and that's okay too. But there are times of the year when you would want to do that. These are kind of times where you really want to get that pruning done ASAP. You can see some storm damage on the right. Looks like we've got a little bit of a snowstorm or an ice storm that's broken out the crown of the tree. That happens here too. We get a lot of hurricanes, tropical storm strength winds that come through and cause a lot of damage. So we need to rectify that. You need to get a good clean cut, and that helps the tree heal, and that also helps prevent disease-causing organisms from getting in there and causing more problems. So also, you would want to improve flowering and fruiting. So I mentioned woody plants. That can be trees, but it can also be shrubs like your azaleas there. And it can be muscadines, your grapes, blueberries, edible types of plants. Muscadines need very heavy pruning every year in order to actually fruit and provide that fruit for you. So it's important that you make sure that you understand the process of why you're doing it so that you do it correctly and at the right time of year. So you would do it to control natural shape and size and also for safety and visibility. So some examples over here, you've got on the left, you've got some branches that are just really, really overgrown. They're hanging over the sidewalk. They're a safety hazard. People are bumping their heads into them every time they walk past your house. They're probably complaining about you and saying, I need to call the HOA on that person because they are not maintaining their yard. So in situations like that, you're going to try to prune that plant back so that you have safety and visibility. Very important if you're driving, if you're near a road, like in this case, sidewalk with the road, you want to make sure that people can actually walk on that sidewalk without hitting their head or without having to bend over and lean over because they've got something hanging on them, and have clearance to get back. You also see down here, you've got some folks that have these beautiful lilacs in their driveway, and they're all but covering up this little shed on the end because they've just gotten really overgrown. And I know, lilacs are beautiful and they smell so wonderful. It's hard. You don't want to prune that out, that growth out, because you're like, oh, it's going to impact the flowers that I get. Maybe it is an azalea. Maybe it's a camellia. Maybe it's a hydrangea. But know that they will grow and that they will heal, and it will help with the aesthetics and the property. So just make sure that whether you're doing it for because the neighbors are complaining or the HOA is complaining or you're doing it for the health, it's always important that you do that. So you also might do it for disease management. So you can see here, you've got these Leland cypress that are out adjacent to this fence. And you've got probably some type of canker that's going on here. These trees are really susceptible to a lot of diseases and issues. And so you get a real hot, dry spell, you get some compacted soil, or you get bad drainage, or you get some real wet wet deals like this last month of May and June where you had tons and tons of rain. And if they're planted too close together and there's no airflow, you can end up with disease. So you want to try to maintain your trees in as healthy a shape as you possibly can. And that means planting them at the proper distance apart so that as they grow, they don't encroach on one another and decrease that airflow. And also, if you do, even if you have planted them correctly, you may find that some of these diseases creep in when you least expect it. So you need to go in there, and sometimes you'll have to remove diseased branches and parts of a tree or a shrub. Make sure you're doing that correctly with the using proper sanitation procedures with your pruners, but you may need to go in and remove parts of that to preserve the rest of the plant. So that's acceptable also. You may have just a really overgrown tree. It's just getting really big for the area that it's in. You've got a cryptomeria and it's blocking your driveway. I mean, you put it in there maybe for some um, you know, shade or privacy or whatever, and now it's just overgrowing everything else that's in there. You can do some pruning on that in order to kind of pare it back so that the plants that are growing in front of it don't get crowded out. So in situations like that, that's okay too. So the 3 T's for proper pruning: using the appropriate tool. So don't go out there with a pair of hand pruners when you have a 3-inch branch that you've got to take off of let's say you've got a dogwood out there and your dogwood has a dead branch because it's a little bit susceptible to drought. And so you've had some problems and now you're like, well, I don't have anything else, so I guess I'll just saw it with my hand pruners. Don't do that. Get the appropriate tool. Borrow it from somebody. Make sure that you're doing your proper sanitation procedures. But, go buy it, borrow it, whatever you need to do. But make sure you have the appropriate tool because you can cause more damage if you're not using the appropriate tool. Use the correct technique. So we'll go over some techniques here. Obviously, the 3-point technique, that's going to be, your best bet here. And you want to make sure that you're doing it correctly. If you have a really big branch, that's going to require more careful planning and a correct technique for removing that branch so you don't injure the rest of the tree versus if you're just removing a 4 centimeter branch off of a camellia bush. So just make sure you're using the correct technique. And pruning at the right time. I did mention it first. There are some times where you can prune at any time. If you have storm damage, and that can be winter, that can be summer, spring. You want to make sure that you clean that up. You don't want to leave jagged edges and branches and half the crown out and torn. You want to get in there and you want to clean that up because if you don't, that tree or that bush or shrub is going to likely have more problems from ragged edges where insects can get in and disease can get in and cause problems than if you actually went in and pruned it at the wrong time of the year. Also, some particular plants like blueberries, you want to do that after they're done producing. There's times, Melissa Todd, if you could please be careful. I wasn't able to turn off the annotation. I see people are drawing on the screen, so just be very careful, please. Apologies. So it's important that you prune at the right time. And a lot of times that's going to be in the wintertime when things are dormant and less disease causing organisms, less mold, mildew, insects, that kind of stuff. That's going to be a better time to do it. Pruning tools. So here are some examples of pruning tools. You can have a bow saw, hedge shears, lopping shears. You've got a pruning saw. You've got a crescent grip type folding saw. There's all sorts of different pruners out there that will help you with what you're using or what you need to do. And these all should be in your toolbox, in your shed, in your garage. You're not going to use them all the time. I mean, you may go a couple years and not use your lopping shears, but then again, you may. And so just make sure that you have them and that they're well maintained. You may also find a need for a pole pruner. So if you have a lot of taller trees, maybe you're in an older established home, property that has some older established trees, probably not what's going on if you're in a new subdivision, but this is an invaluable tool. So this will allow you to get dead branches that are up above your head. This may help you raise the canopy. So if you're hitting your head as you're cutting your grass in your front lawn, you can go in and you can get some of those higher branches and move that canopy up so that you can go underneath the tree branches without hitting your head. You also will definitely want to have some kind of a sharpening stone. Not everybody wants to do this. I mean, you can take them down to your local Ace Hardware and they will sharpen your tools for you. Costs money, but if you want to do it yourself, it helps to have the proper equipment. So, besides purchasing really good quality garden tools, you may also choose to have a sharpening stone in with all of those tools so that you can sharpen. It will be 1,000 times easier and you won't have to saw away at things if you have the appropriate tools. So most regrowth is going to occur within about 8 inches of the cut. So you really need to know where you're cutting. Every spring we'll get pictures of people who have just hacked their trees or their bushes or their shrubs or whatever, and they want to know why they have weird growth that's sprouting out at different angles, and they're just beside themselves because maybe the tree has started to die. It's very important when you do any kind of pruning that you're going to take it down to the closest, nearest branch. And the reason is because when you do that, you're going to have something take over called apical dominance. So you'll have that singular piece that sticks up that usually some people call them suckers, but the part that maybe is growing the wrong direction, maybe it's growing really tall and it's just out of place and you want to remove that. That's fine. You need to follow that leader back down to where it intersects in the branch that it's coming off of. And it's going to be removed there. And what that will do is that changes the apical dominance. And so that branch, that either the next one down, you can see that off to the left of the finger, that's the next one up. And so that one will assume that dominant structure and it will start to grow that way. That's how you prune if you have like a pergola or a trellis or something and you're trying to train plants to it. That's basically the technique behind there. You're only following branches that grow a certain direction, that's laterally, and you're training them that way. So this is one way that you can go in there and you can fix the growth habit of whatever plant it is. So here's a little bit more of a better infographic of that. You have the top or the terminal bud, and let's say you've got we'll say it's a blueberry bush, and it's just shot up this new growth that's 4 feet tall, and you had a lot of rain, and you're like, I can't reach that. So what you're going to do is you're going to come just below that bud, that node on there, down to whatever height you want it to be, and you're going to take that and prune it there. So you can see kind of what it looks like. You've got your nodes. Those are your growth nodes of where a branch or leaf can come out. You've got your terminal bud. That's where the apical dominance is. That's going to be at the very tippy top. You've got your lateral buds, and that's how you can control whether you have growth to the right or left. And then you'll have scars where leaves have dropped if you have a deciduous tree. So that's kind of how you read through the scribbles on the screen, because we're just going to joke about that now. Just as an aside, if you're on a mobile phone, be very careful about finger placement because that's usually how this happens. But we're just going to laugh about it now. Here is a close-up of a node. You can see the leaf that has come out, and you've got another bud, a lateral bud that is above that. You have a leaf scar where that last year's leaf fell off, and then you have the bud scale scar down below that. So cutting. Obviously, that's very important. And there is a right way to do that, and there is a wrong way to do that. So, the correct way to do that is to do just above one of those buds, those new little buds that you saw. And you're going to do it at just a slight angle. And the reason you do that is so that any moisture, rain, any of that is going to kind of roll off of that cut. You don't want it to be too steep, like you see there in B. That's too wide of an angle. You don't want it that steep. You don't want too far from the bud. You see there, because what'll happen is you'll get some dead tissue above that. And you don't want it too close to the bud, because if you get it too close to the bud, you actually might interfere with that bud starting to grow, and because you've damaged the cellular structure. So it's very important that you aren't too close to the bud either. So always cut back from the bud. So here you can see how you're going to do that. So if, say, you wanted to take off, I see somebody is drawing on the screen again. Oh, you're removing it. Yay, thank you. Please be careful about finger placement. Yeah. So you can see there for cut B, that's going to be, if you don't want that branch to grow off and down and long, which if you're trying to raise the canopy on a tree, you're going to take that down to the base of where it intersects with the branch that it's growing from. If you want to try to prevent the growth from going further out over something. Let's say you've got grass and you're noticing your grass, the persistence is kind of dying back, and you want to remove some of the ends of those branches on that tree that's growing over that area. Melissa Todd, thank you. Then you can use the technique for A, to remove that branch so that you take it back to the next bud. And if you need to remove the whole branch, then you're going to go to C, but you want to make sure that you're leaving approximately an inch or so outside of the branch collar. There'll be some pictures of that. We don't want to cut into the trunk of the tree. All right, so some other things. You'll see this more with shrubs and heading and thinning. So we see a lot of these meatball shrubs and folks that kind of like to prune in the older style that we see from like 25 or 30 years ago, where everything is super manicured, which is reminiscent of an English garden or something, where you'll see different shapes, kind of like that picture that you saw when I first started the program. That's called heading. So what you're doing is you're just maintaining the shape of the tree. And what happens, and you can see a very good example of that here, is that the new growth, like I showed you before, it comes out in that 8 inches or so from where the cut is. So all that growth is going to be right on the ends of that tree. So if you were to push those branches apart and look in there, there's nothing in the middle. It's all hollow. There's nothing in there. So that's going to be a heading prune. And we really don't recommend that. In some cases where you have a very manicured garden, we understand that that's part of that garden. But generally speaking, it's better to have a natural shaped plant and to choose your plant based on its natural tendencies to grow, either in an oval shape or in a flowing, low growing shape, something like that. Pick something that's appropriate for the site. Don't force it on the plant. So the thing to do when you have a lot of overgrowth, the better thing to do anyway, is thinning. And so this can be a multi-year process where you go in and you find branches that are rubbing, maybe branches that are too close, branches that are just, there's too many of them in one cluster in one style, and you're going to follow that all the way back to its base, and you remove the entire branch. And what that does is that's going to open that interior up a little bit. It's going to drop the canopy of the shrub or the tree, and it's going to give it a better shape. And so this is a technique that we usually recommend for folks that have maybe inappropriately planted and chosen landscape shrubs that are in front of their house, and now they're starting to grow up in front of their bay window, and they don't want to take the whole thing out. So they're asking us, how do we fix this? And we don't want nasty grams from the HOA. So this is what we usually recommend, thinning. And there's several variations of this. Sometimes folks can take off the back of the shrub and then wait a year or two until you get enough regrowth and then take off the front of the shrub. And so now you see what would be the I guess it's a larger size, what it probably was when it was initially planted. So there's things that you can do, and that's what we here. We are here at Extension for, to kind of give you the examples of stuff like that. So if you have questions, you can always send us a picture, and we're happy to kind of help plan that in your landscape. So here's an example of a meatball shrub. Lots of maintenance that goes in there, but it doesn't look very natural in the landscape, does it? So not something that, I like to laugh at these. We see a lot fewer of them than we used to, but I do go past some every day when I'm driving home from work. Never see the person out there with the hedge clippers, but I do see some out there. And this is what it looks like. This one got probably hit by a car or something like that, and it pulled out some. But you can see very clearly the interior doesn't have any leaves. It's all growing in probably 4 to 6 inches around the exterior of the shrub. So this is what happens when you prune this poor thing with heading cuts for its whole life, and you end up with this shrub that just is hollow inside. There's just nothing in there. As an aside, when I was a kid in our neighborhood, we had some we had a family that did this a lot, and the interior of the shrub had a perfect place for a little kid to go hide. So that was our fort. We would go in there, and we would hide in our fort. And it was, even if it rained, it was so thick that we were usually protected in there for a while. So that's kind of fun. This is also what you see. So here these folks have gone, oh, it's overhanging our sidewalk. We need to do something here. So they've gone and they've pruned this side of the shrub. Now, having said that, there will be some regrowth on this side, but it will take a bit of time. So just understand that you can go in. It's going to look ugly for a bit, but functionally speaking, it will be much happier, a much happier experience walking past your property, and it will recover. The root system of the plant does have enough nutrients in it that it can push out new leaves and new growth. And while it will look kind of weird shaped afterwards because it's not natural, you've had to go in and prune it, it will heal. So if you have to do this, this is called a renewal prune, or it's a type of renewal prune. We can help you with that also. So as I mentioned, we get a lot of calls from people going, hey, the plants in front of my house are too big. What do I do? Well, you've got options. You can either rip them all out and start with appropriate sized plants that won't get too tall, or you can go in and do some renewal pruning. So this is just an example of plants that are probably not appropriately placed. Wrong species. It's not the right plant, right place. That's kind of our motto here at Extension, one of them anyway. Right plant, right place. And this one is obviously not, because it's too big and it's weirdly shaped. So if you want to go in and prune, looking at this misshapen shrub that you have here on the top, this is what you're going to do. You want to take it down to a more manageable, more manicured look. So you're going to look for suckers, if you will, or branches that extend above the area. Don't be afraid. Get in there, move things off to the side, look, that kind of stuff. And then you're going to follow that branch down to the base, like you see here on the left. And that's where you're going to use your pruners or your loppers to remove those particular branches. And you're going to get them out of the way. And so that's going to give you a much more manicured appearance, like you see below. Here is a hedgerow that's kind of bad looking. It's got some growth, but then I can see through it, and it's just not looking very good. This might be a good candidate for a renewal prune because it's just not, it doesn't look that good. And there's a right way and a wrong way to do that. So as you've already learned in the appropriate ways of removing branches, heading it on the right is the wrong way to do it. But there are a lot of people that do that. Their neighbors like, I don't want to see over this hedge, or I can't see over this hedge. So they're just going to take their little hedge clippers and they're going to go along and take off the top. And while the base of it keeps, growing and doing what it's doing, that top is never going to get any thicker. The right way to do that is to do what picture before showed, where you find particular branches, you go down, you remove those, get them out of the way, and so you have a healthier structure of that particular hedge. So you can see these plants were all planted at the same time, and they were planned to be a hedge. But you don't have a whole lot of growth at the bottom. Maybe that's not a problem. But if you've got angry barking dogs and you put them there because you're trying to help your neighbors out, the dogs are just going to put their head down there and look underneath. So you need to kind of take that or factor that in. The mature height of these bushes versus growth patterns and things like that. So in a case like that, you may want to put some additional plantings down at the bottom to hide that. Because you may have moved into this house, there's only so much you can do. In this case, you can't do much about it. It's an old hedge, but you can adjust the landscape in order to help situations. So this is a dwarf Burford holly. Dwarf does not always mean that it's going to stay small forever. So always look at the tag to see what the mature height and width will be of that particular plant before you install it into your landscape. Some things that say dwarf on there truly are dwarf. They may only get 3 foot wide by 2 foot tall, but some things may not be, and they may just be slower growing. So sometimes that also kind of falls under the dwarf heading, meaning it just takes a while for it to get bigger. So here you can see that this particular hedge was done the right way, and it was judiciously pruned the correct way, so it's very thick. It looks really nice, and it's fairly dense, and it's going to be, if you were to go in there and pull it apart, look in there, you would probably be amazed that there were a lot more leaves and thickness to that structure than some of these others that I've shown pictures of. So here's improper pruning. If you look at the right, do you ever find that shape in nature? Probably not. It looks like a flat top on somebody's head, and that does not look normal in nature. Possibly they did that because people were complaining they couldn't see around it. It's in an area on an island that is right near a yield sign. People probably said, oh, it grew in the yield sign. I can't see the yield sign. So it's just a bad place for it. Again, we say right plant, right place. This is not the right plant, and it is not the right place. Excuse me. And similarly here along this chain link this is too tall and too wide for this particular area. You need to choose something that is a much more appropriate size plant for the location that it's in. Crepe myrtle pruning. So if you're involved at all in extension, you have probably heard the phrase crepe murder. We try to educate folks that you really shouldn't hack the crepe myrtles off every single year, but you still see it usually sometimes in December all the way through March, usually before they start sending out new growth. You will see landscapers going out in professional areas and just hack them off, and that is not a good idea, because what happens is you're taking off a large part of that growth, and that tree then has to push out new growth to replace the growth that you just hacked off. What that does is, if you do it every single year, it reduces the resiliency of that tree, makes it more susceptible to damage and disease and insects and things like that. And so you don't want to make that any more difficult for that tree to survive than it already is. So really the best thing to do, start pruning it when it's young into a healthy, appropriate shape, and allow it to grow up. And then just every year as you need to adjust the shape of it a little bit. If you've got a branch that's rubbing or something like that, go ahead and remove that. But just do minor pruning, just shaping pruning. And again, this will happen really heavy pruning when it's young, but by the time it gets to be a mature tree, because that's what it is a tree, it will have a very good, healthy shape. It will be in a good form. Some of the things that can happen, ambrosia beetles, you can end up with a dead tree or one that's forever going to sprout from the base because you've weakened the immune system of that crepe myrtle. So that's something, and I'm starting to see some ambrosia beetle damage now. So better to be a good caretaker of your crepe myrtle than doing crepe murder. Crepe murder! You don't want to do that. So here's the ambrosia beetle that I was talking about. So they're just kind of innocuous beetles. And you don't even notice them. They will attack other things besides crepe myrtles. Figs, for some reason, they like those. We had some Euonymus this year that has showed up with some ambrosia beetle damage. But what they do is they'll burrow in, and as they eat through, they push out these toothpicks. We call them just toothpicks, but it's the frass. And that is the hallmark of that. So if you see that on a plant and you're like, what are all these little toothpicks protruding out of my tree? Just know that particular part of the tree is probably not long for this world, or your bush. Um, it's just not long for this world. It will resprout from below where that damage is, but it likely will not come back next year, that part of it. It'll have to sprout from the root system. So if you do notice that, get it off, spray it, spray the plants adjacent to it with a permethrin type insecticide to help prevent them from moving over and doing more damage. But that's a bad thing. And you're actually inviting them in by butchering your crepe myrtles. So this is what they look like normally. Very nice, kind of a pyramidal type shape, upside down pyramid. Very pretty. And again, very, very pretty one that's been worked on and pruned initially so that it has that really beautiful kind of, the foliage starts to drop over and you get, the blooms. Looks really nice. And here's the flowering buds. So if you need to do some pruning, it's okay. A lot of times folks will look at what it looks like after it's done blooming. You can go in there and remove some of those branches if you need to in the fall of winter of the year and do some minor pruning. It may be getting too wide, and just like any other tree, it's perfectly fine to remove those. Here's some correctly pruned ones. So this is what it looks like when you do a good job. And here's how you're going into one that was pretty neglected on the front end, and then how you properly prune it. So you're going to prune that upright structure, remove a lot of the branches from down below, raising the canopy, if you will. Renewal pruning, I've already mentioned that a little bit, but this is where you just kind of say, you know what? I bought this house that's 30 years old, and these people didn't do a darn thing to this landscape, and everything is way overgrown and it just looks bad. So I'm just going to start from scratch. And that's okay because it's an old bush or shrub. It's got a lot of nutrients stored in its root system. It can handle a renewal prune. So that means you're going to come in. This is good for hollies. It's good maybe for some older azaleas. It's also good for gardenias, maybe camellias that have gotten a little bit unwieldy that maybe you want to control the shape of. And you're going to come in and you're basically going to take it down to about 18 inches to 2 feet. It's going to look ugly. I'm not going to lie. So if you have some plants that are growing in front of it that you may want to do this in a multi-step process, multi-year process. So you can see there that after you prune it, and this is something you do fairly early in the year, I would say June would be a good time to do it. You're going to see by the end of the summer, you're probably going to have a good bit of regrowth. So it will need some shaping at that point, but it will be a lot better looking than what you were left with, which was blocking your view from your bay window and maybe a safety hazard. So this is what it looks like after it's had all summer to grow. What you don't want to do is you don't want to do renewal pruning in fall or early winter because you're trying to get that plant to push out new growth. And the last thing you want to do is to have that plant pushing out new tender growth right before a cold snap. And so here, it may stay warm until December or January, but it might not. We might have an early frost, and you very easily could damage some of that new green growth before it has a chance to harden off. So make sure that you do it right before. Kind of the cutoff for me is really in mid-June. You can do it after the danger of frost, but before midsummer, there's kind of a sweet spot in there because you want to get that growth where it's starting to harden off and it's older and it's more woody now and it's not as susceptible to freeze damage. So renewal pruning of Elaeagnus. So this is one you can kind of look at what it looked like when they went in. It was really big and overgrown. And then the next growing season, that's what it looked like afterwards. So it is something that you totally can do. It will look ugly at first, but after a bit, it will look much better and you will be like, now the HOA is not going to send me some nasty grams. You can also do stuff to kind of raise the canopy, if you will. Here's an example of where pruning has been done underneath, and that's fine too. You don't want to do serious pruning on conifers. So pines, spruce, junipers, boxwoods, they don't grow the same way that some of these other types of plants do, like hollies and camellias and all of that. So if you go in, and I've seen this where people will plant Leland cypress underneath an electric pole or a wire of some sort. The utility company comes in and they just hack the top of them off. It looks horrible. It does. It's not going to grow back. You're better off at this point to probably just remove them. Get them out, get a stump grinder out there, just take it down and get rid of it. Put something else in that's not going to grow tall. They're not going to recover. They're just not. Here's an instance. This is not going to recover. This is a really old juniper. And you can see there's been a lot of dieback. You've gotten much more shading from the other pines that are nearby. That's not going to recover. So you can't get any more growth on the top. You're going to have to take it all the way down to the bottom. But these are honestly so slow growing. You would be better off to remove the plants that are there and then go back with plants that are appropriate for the light conditions, which at this point look like it's a lot more shady than it used to be. And so you might want to look into plants that are more tolerant of those conditions. All right, moving on, the 3-step process for pruning on a tree. So I mentioned don't use hand pruners for a branch on a tree that's going to be like 3 inches in diameter. You'll do a lot of sawing and it'll ruin your pruners and it'll ruin the tree. So this is what you're doing here. So you've got that's going to be kind of your branch collar area. And you've got, you want to stay out of that area. So if you're going to try to cut something, you can kind of see the little dotted line there. You're going right through the branch collar. That tree is not going to be able to heal itself. Trees go through something called a coated process where they actually can heal themselves. So after a branch is pruned, that tree will wall off the living cambium layer around there. It'll actually put a callus over that to prevent disease-causing organisms from getting in there. There are certain cells that will promote that and allow that. And then that's why if you see a tree after many, many years, where maybe you've pruned some branches to raise up that canopy, you'll see it's kind of grown and knuckled over, and you may see a little bit of a hole there, but it's healed itself. So as long as you prune it appropriately where you're supposed to, it can do that if it's a healthy tree. But if you go up there to where D, up there towards the end, that's not the right place. You've got too much wood that can now die and decompose and invite in insects and other disease organisms. So you don't want to do that. B is the appropriate place to do that because you're outside the branch collar and just outside. You want to have about an inch or so outside the branch collar. That allows the tree to grow and heal over, but doesn't leave enough dead wood behind for it to rot and break down and invite insects to come in. And A is just a little bit too close. It's right on the branch collar. You are more likely to interfere with the cells growing there than you are if you choose B. So always opt to go about an inch out from that branch collar. So pruning cuts, you again want to leave that branch collar intact. In a larger branch situation, we use the 3-step method because if you use that on you don't need to use it on a smaller one, because if you are able to cut through, that branch doesn't weigh enough, it's not going to pull any bark or cause damage pulling down. But on a bigger one, it'll pull that bark down and it'll damage the tree going down. You don't want to do that. That again just invites in disease causing organisms and insects. So for a smaller branch on a tree, you can get by with the hand pruners or the loppers. And then for a larger branch, you're going to use some type of a pole saw or a hand saw or something like that. And you're going to do it in multiple cuts. So the first cut you want to do farther out, and that's going to take off the weight of the branch. So first undercut, that way if when you do the second cut, which is a little further out, it does peel, it's going to hit that first cut, snap off, and fall down. So, you want to make sure, of course, you're safe, but you also want to make sure that that tree stays safe. And then after you've removed the weight of that branch, then you go back just outside that branch collar, and then you go and you cut, because you remove the weight at that point, then that branch can be removed down to the point where the tree can heal. It'll be healthy, and you won't have the bark that's pulled down and the damage to the branch collar. So here's an example. You can see in the top left, he's gone and he's undercutting that branch. So he's adding a stop. This is a pretty hefty branch. It looks like it's probably about, I don't know, 4 to 6 inches in diameter. So pretty good, hefty branch. You want to do that undercut because there's so much weight there that if you don't, you see there in the next picture on the top, it's going to split on the top and it's going to try to peel. But when you've put that undercut there, it can't, because you've already cut it. So what it does is it pops and breaks right there at that first cut, and it'll fall down. Once you've done that, then you come back in and you can cut it appropriately just off the branch collar so that the tree remains healthy. That's the right way to do it. And you can see this poor tree here. It can tell some tales. I feel so bad for street trees in suburbia and urban areas because, it's a mishmash. Sometimes people do it the right way, sometimes they do it the wrong way. This tree has got so many different cuts. You can see, up there, one of the top arrows, they cut it correctly. It started to heal itself. And then off to the side, you've got some dead stuff protruding out of an area where it tried to heal itself. It's bad. You just want to almost laugh at this point. But yeah, this is what our suburban urban trees have to deal with, in addition to root issues and root pruning. And yeah, it's just a big mess. So this is what a tree should look like. And you can see, excuse me, it has grown over, it's healed itself. You've got some of that dead wood in the middle, but honestly, the tree has already healed itself and it's compartmentalized that. So this is what a cut should look like after a few years. This has been properly pruned. So you can see that it's outside the branch collar by about 1.5 to 2 inches, which is perfect. And they haven't done any damage. They did the 3-cut method. Looks great. And this one will heal over time. Wound dressing. I still see this. I'm on a lot of arborist Facebook pages and other just general tree pages on Facebook. I see people recommending wound dressing all the time. Don't do it. If you paint this stuff over the end of the tree or the branch that you just cut, what you're doing is sealing in whatever contaminants, which could be a fungal spore or bacteria or a bug, you're sealing that in there. Don't do it. Just resist it. If it's in your garage, throw it out. Take it to the toxic waste days that Gwinnett County offers for getting rid of stuff like that in your garage. Don't put it on there. Your tree is perfectly capable of healing itself. You don't need that. Spring versus summer flowering. Pruning spring flowering plants after they bloom, like azaleas. Summer flowering before new growth begins. So if they flower later in the summer, July, August, they're going to flower on new growth. So you can go in and in the late winter time and remove growth, and then they'll send out new growth and they'll bloom in the time period they normally would, late summer. So prune after they bloom. Here is a listing of the different types of plants that you want to bloom or prune after they bloom. So these are spring flowering. Now, not to say that you can't prune these in the wintertime. You can if you need to, because you bought a house and it's overgrown, go ahead and do it, but just understand you're probably not going to have any blooms or have very few blooms that first year. The next year it will recover and it will bloom after that. But if you want to preserve the bloom, this is the proper time period when you would prune. So let's zoom through. So here's some azaleas. These are kind of overgrown. This is how they should look for this particular cultivar. This is what a forsythia should look like. Now we see people that are pruning them into hedges and keeping them small. Again, not necessarily the right plant, right place, but this is what they should look like. Hydrangeas. There are more rules with hydrangeas. I do have a webinar that I did a while back. I'll probably redo it maybe next summer, I think, because it was very popular and it talked about how do you properly prune to keep your blooms, how do you get the pretty colors, that kind of stuff, all the different types. Summer flowering plants. You want to prune before spring growth begins. So in after the danger of the coldest point in the winter, which is usually February here. So these are the ones that you're going to prune before you get that new flush of growth in the spring. And so chase tree, Vitex, this is a pretty one. You can either keep it in a, shrub kind of look, or you can prune up the canopy into more of a tree. So it's a little flexible. Crepe myrtles, same thing. These typically, just don't crepe myrtle them, but you can do the pruning and that's why they typically go in and hack them off. But don't do that. Just kind of judicious pruning. Hybrid roses. Do it after the danger of the real coldest weather, because if it rains and it gets down in there, it can actually kill the tissue. That's why we say wait until kind of after the danger of that frost. Pruning dues. Plan every cut. That's why I said go out there and walk and look. Walk around all of it. Walk around that plant. Figure out what you're going to do. Plan it out on paper if you have to. If you want to go in and mark the branches, do that too. Do prune to an outward facing bud. If you've got landscape plantings under your window, you want that growth to grow out so that it appears very green. You don't want it to go up. You don't want it to go back. You want it to grow out. So plan that. Stand back and look at it after each cut. That way you're not taking off what you shouldn't be taking off and then calling me going, how do I save this? I gave it too much of a haircut. Pruning, don't give it a haircut. Don't go crazy with removal of your branches. Just don't. Take it off, look at it, walk back, ask some folks, does this look good? That kind of thing. Don't leave stumps. Make sure that you're sticking with stuff that's, not too close to the branch collar, but not too far away. Don't use dull equipment. If you aren't comfortable sharpening the blades, take them to Ace Hardware and let them do that. Don't prune everything into one shape. It looks weird. I know some people think that the whole meatball craze is a good thing. It's not. The green industry has shifted away from the real heavy pruning stuff and now goes more towards the natural look. Remember, right plant, right place, or right location, whatever you want to think. Pruning should be very localized, meaning you're looking at that plant, and if you've got one branch that kind of sticks off, go ahead and remove that, leave the rest of it. Thinning cuts are best. Not renewal necessarily, not heading, but thinning. So if you want to thin that plant out so it's healthier and it gets a little more airflow, that's fine. Use the 3-cut method when you're pruning trees. If the branch is bigger than 3 inches, use the 3-cut method. Otherwise, you risk damaging the tree. Wound dressings aren't necessary. Don't recommend them. Throw them out. Don't buy them. Don't waste your money. Prune spring flowering plants after they bloom, like azaleas. And your summer flowering plants, you can prune those before they leaf out because they grow on new growth. And then keep your pruning tools sharp and clean. The other thing I will add here is make sure if you're pruning diseased stuff, any type of branches, if you're lending them out to anybody, disinfect. Very important. You don't want to bring anything onto your property that you don't have. And that's basically it. So I didn't add the QR code and all of that, but this is my email address. I'll have to go back and add that. I've since added that to everybody, most of my other stuff. So let's see if you have any questions. Thank you all for putting where you're from. If you have joined afterwards, after I initially said that, if you don't mind, please go in and put your location in there because I would love to be able to see where everybody is from. Sometimes we have folks that register through Laura, and she just puts our address in. So I don't get to see where everybody is from, and it's always fun for me to see where folks are from and if we have a lot of folks that are out of the area. Let's see. Still looking to see if there's any questions. What's the best resource to check the best time of year to prune certain bushes in particular? Good question. So Extension has lots and lots of publications. And when I say Extension, I don't mean just UGA publications. I mean Extension is based in every state. Some Extension agencies in certain states have better publications than others do. So I always recommend, if you're certainly welcome to call or email us as a resource, and we can usually direct you to that particular publication and that information because we know where to look. We can tell you, or you're welcome to do that yourself. So you can just go into a search engine and you can type in whatever plant it is, and then just literally ask, when is the best time to prune? And then after you've added that, make sure you add either .edu or extension. And what that'll do is that'll give you publications from extension agencies that talk about that particular plant and how to prune it, how to properly care for it, that kind of thing. But with AI on the scene now, AI is doing a great job at really helping to direct search engines. And you can use Copilot even, and you can ask it for citations. Or you can ask it to pull up only extension documents. It's an excellent way to find good publications for whatever topic you want without going through 100 different things in the search engine that you were looking at. It's very concise. You do have to make sure that it is a good source. Always ask for the citation or the publication, and then click on the link to be taken directly to it. Always do that to make sure that you're looking at good information. Don't always just look at whatever the first thing on Google is. All right, let's see. Any other questions? If the hydrangea webinar was recorded, can you share that link? It is in Metro Master Gardener on YouTube. Oops. So let's see. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. And then let me see if I can find that link for you, and I'll post that in there. My connection is lacking at the moment. Nothing like a really lousy connection in a county building. All right, let's see. Copy. Almost there. paste. There, Metro Master Gardener on YouTube. So you should be able to click that and it'll take you directly to that. And then I'm going to give you my email address. And that is if you have questions. Know that if you are not in Gwinnett County, yes, I will answer your questions. But you do have an extension agency in the county in which you're from. Even if you're not in Georgia, you will have an extension agency office in the county in which you're from. It's just always a different university. So if you're in South Carolina, it's Clemson. If you're in Florida, it's University of Florida. If you're in Texas, it's Texas A&M. It just really depends. So each state has its own land grant university, and checking to see if there's any other questions. When to prune the Indian hawthorn shrub? Excuse me. So Indian hawthorns, like I said, I'm not going to Indian hawthorns don't do so well here anyway. They tend to have freeze damage. Please don't prune it in early winter. It's going to bloom in early spring, so you would prune probably right after that, and then that would give all summer long for it to grow back. This is one that can get a little unwieldy or can get some freeze damage. So if you're trying to prune that out and it looks really ugly because it's had some freeze damage, if you want to try a renewal prune on it, do that right at the beginning of the summer. So after the danger of frost is over with, after it's bloomed, then go in and hack it down to a much more manageable size. You can try thinning it, but usually they stay pretty good hedge size and they would look kind of funny. So with those, you really need to take it down and do a renewal prune to like 18 inches or 24 inches, something like that. All right, let's see. Anything else? Best time to prune daisy gardenias. So gardenias after summer bloom, some of them are reblooming. They are evergreen. So, you would want to do it after they're done blooming because they usually bloom in early spring. Well, early summer. Sorry, I've been talking too much. Hmm. Um, let's see what else. Looking to see if there's anything else here. Thank you. And okay. If you have any other questions, drop them in there now. If not, then that's pretty much it for the Lunch and Learn on pruning, and it is recorded, so I should be putting that up there in the YouTube channel. Maybe this week, I would think. And there is one from previous years. Some of these I do repeat because they're good information. And folks always need to know how to prune. So some of these are repeats. So there is one already up there, but sometimes I talk about other stuff and there's always good questions at the end. So thank you all for attending. I appreciate that. And I hope that you all have a good afternoon. Thanks for tuning in.